Hey guys, I just wanted to come back and share something because the whole Bible is so rich, but I've just been spending a lot of time meditating on First Kings 18 through 19. This is where Elijah shows up and there's a whole showdown with the Baal prophets, and there's a severe famine in the land. And this is also where Jezebel, the king's wife, threatens his life. And so there's just a lot happening there. And so I just wanted to take time and just meditate on it. And I'm sure that I haven't even mined the depths of it. But just some things that just stood out to me that I just wanted to just highlight a little bit for us. And I just hope that they give us encouragement and just the strength, the grace to keep standing and persevering, especially in these days when things are just so hard. It seems like every time you turn on the news, there's just some other devastation, or on social media, people are just sharing all kinds of vile things that we as human beings tend to do to each other. And so we are so far removed from what God intended when He created human beings in Genesis and made us in His image and likeness, and told us to be His stewards of His creation. And so that his glory can fill all creation. We're so far removed. We're certainly not the first generation to be so far removed from that. And I think that's why it's so important to go back and look in the Bible and learn the mistakes of people who've come before us, and not just their mistakes, but the things that they did right, and also to see their humanity. I think one of the things for me that I'm really liking. Um, and the reason I think I'm just kind of hanging out so much in First Kings, especially verse 18 and 19, the way it's grabbed a hold of me, reading about Elijah and also some of the other people, is just how human they were, and how being human does not make you less spiritual. Paul, I think, is the one who said it best when he said, "My strength is made perfect when I'm sorry, God's strength is made perfect when I am weak." So when I'm at my weakest, and not just even when I'm at my weakest, but every time, because I'm never going to be God ever. So it's just good to know that I'm always going to be human, and that means I have limitations. Um, and therefore, just to have that posture of humility and just bring my humanity to Him and just say, Lord, this is just where I am. This is how I'm seeing the situation. James 5:17 says it best when it says that Elijah was a man just like we are. It says Elijah was a man just as powerful a prophet as he was a man. He was like us. He felt the same things we felt. He struggled through the same things. He struggled to understand what God was doing, what was going on, why things were not working out how he expected them to work out. But what I love about him is that he shows us, even in that humanity, even in that disappointment, discouragement. Some people even say that he was depressed, that he was burnt out and depressed when we find him um, in First Kings 18. And this is where he goes off and he runs away because his life has been threatened by Jezebel. And what I like is, like I said in the last video, he was just honest with God. He was just saying, take my life. I'm like, there's nothing left. What I want to talk about today is what may have driven him to that point, which I think which we all struggle with, is our expectations. How we expect God to show up, how we expect God to be, versus the reality. So just keep this in mind. Picture this. They've just gone through 3 years of severe famine. Like animals are dying. It's not just those ones of, I'm struggling to make ends meet. I'm waiting for the next paycheck. Like literally, animals are dying because there's nothing for the animals to eat, which means there's nothing for the people to eat. It's affecting everything. And it's not, this is an agricultural society. So they're in really bad shape. They depend on the land. Okay. They depend, and the animals depend on the land. So if there's a famine, they're just doomed. Okay. Um, on top of that, there's also, it's not just a material, physical effect of the famine. There's also a spiritual effect because the priests and prophets relied on people um, contributing to their welfare. Okay, if you remember, when the land was divided, the priests were given a share of the land, but they were supposed to receive from everybody else. So if there's nothing for people to give to the priests, then the priests are not able to go, not only for their own sustenance and for their own lives, for their own food and well-being, but they're also not able to go make sacrifices in the temple. So this affects even the spiritual side. So it's a very holistic, it's a spirit, it's a very much a political problem, because the king and his wife are really the ones orchestrating this whole idol worship, and that's why judgment has come. But it's affecting the spiritual, and it's affecting the material, well-being of everybody. So it's a very holistic problem. So they've just come from that. Okay, so now it's raining. God has said He'll send rain, and then we see. So Elijah comes and he's confronting the prophets, and um, he has confronted the prophets, and there's this whole manifestation. Okay, where God is revealed, and the people acknowledge and say, "Oh yeah, we believe in God," and they worship Him, and Elijah kills the false prophets of Baal. And so he's expecting, oh my goodness, we've turned a corner now, right? We've turned a corner. We are ready now to move forward and worship the true God and be restored in our relationship with Him. Now we can start moving forward and being the people of covenant, fulfilling our identity, our image bearing identity, who we've been called to be, the people of God. And that's not the case. I mean, the people are obviously willing, but then there's this huge stronghold where when Jezebel finds out, she's just ready to squash all that. Okay, she's ready to get rid of Elijah. Anyway, so I was thinking about Elijah's discouragement, and I was thinking about how I wonder if Elijah was like us, where we see God is moving. Okay, the famine has ended. People have repented. We're now worshiping God, and we're thinking things are taking a turn. Things have been bad for 3 years or 10 years, or I don't know what your situation is, however long. And now we're starting to see like things are changing. Oh my goodness, we think, oh, restoration is coming and it's going to be full restoration. It's been so bad. We're just so happy for some relief. Things are starting to change. And boom, we come across a Jezebel, and an Ahab who are still wanting for things to go back, who are not willing to repent and be part of the restoration. And he's discouraged. He's so discouraged. And I think sometimes we put our expectations on God. And what Elijah does is so smart, because he says, okay, I thought things were going to change completely. Like we had really turned a corner. Like the whole nation was going to move forward. We were going to start being the people you've called us to be, all of us, and led. And there was going to be repentance from the top. But it looks like there's still problems. There's still problems, Lord. And he's so discouraged because he knows it's not over. It's really not over. Um, so it seems it's one of those where you feel like you've taken one giant step forward and then you've taken a series of, 5 steps back, and you feel like you're stuck, you know. Um, so I just want to talk about that, where we really need to be careful a lot of times where we project our expectations. We think that because such and such has happened, that God must be doing such and such, and we're celebrating because we think things have taken a turn. Our worship of God in a lot of ways is dependent on our circumstances. Okay. And so I think this is why Elijah has to go spend time. One, in his discouragement, he has to spend one-on-one time with the Lord, and he's honest with the Lord. And what I want to point out is, if you notice that, after when now Elijah goes off and and the Lord wakes him up to eat, and he eats, and then he's woken up again to eat, and he eats again, and then he's in the presence of the Lord, and there's the fire, there's the earthquake, there's the wind, and it says he's in the presence of the Lord, and there's this manifestation of the presence of God with the fire, the earthquake, the wind. But it says that the Lord is not in the Lord's voice. He doesn't hear God's voice in any of that. Okay, he hears God's voice in a still small voice. So I wanted to ask us how many times. So we talked about our expectations and how sometimes our expectations can be opposite of what is going on in reality. With this, I wanted to ask us how many times we've been content with the big manifestation of God. All right, we're in a church service and people are getting healed, and all this, or even in our own lives, the person we've been praying for forever has gotten saved or healed, or whatever it is that we've been praying for. Um, but then God is saying, I've shown you the manifestation of my presence, but I need you to get quiet because I need you to hear. I have something to say to you. I have something to say to you that is going to affect not just the present, but the future. And that's thankfully that's what Elijah does is he hears the voice after all that. Okay, this is the man who was on Mount Carmel with the Baal prophets, and he saw that manifestation of God, and the whole nation saw the manifestation of God. So he knows the difference between seeing a manifestation of God and being in God's presence, God revealing His presence, and hearing God speak. And we're told that it's in the still small voice, in the silence. Basically, the scholars have struggled to translate what the Hebrew word for that. So they just settled with a still small voice, okay, or some of them say with a whisper. Um, and that's where he hears God's voice and God speaks to him in that. So I want to encourage us and say, let's not be content with just the manifestation. That's powerful. We do need that because other people need to see that so that they can believe in God and God's glory can be manifested. But let's not just stop there. Let's press in some more and just seek to hear his voice. And that's going to happen when we have a posture of silence and tuning into him and hearing what he has to say. Um, the third thing I want to point out is with all of this, I guess this is the main point with all of this is let's humble ourselves. We can have our needs and our wants, but let's humble ourselves and ask God to reveal himself however he wants to. If he wants to do the wind, the rain, the fire, the earthquake, however he wants to reveal himself, that we recognize him in the way he's revealing himself, um, that we discern that it's him and that we submit to that. We don't project how we want him to show up or what we want the outcome of a situation to be. We submit to that because if you notice that when God speaks to him in that, when he hears God's voice in that still small voice in that silence, he obeys what God tells him to do because he's given a plan for the future. Because even though things look discouraging for Elijah, God is not discouraged. He has a plan and a purpose. He's still going to continue fulfilling his covenant with his people. The other thing I want to point out is another character. I haven't talked about Obadiah in this instance, as we've been talking about this section of scripture. Obadiah is the man that calls him a servant of the king. So this is a man who feared the Lord. It says he feared the Lord and he was a servant of the king. We're living in an age where people seem to really struggle with having people in authority over them who do not believe in God. I'm talking about Christians. There's this struggle. We're pushing, we're making laws, we're trying to make other people, we're trying to make society believe like we do and fighting them. And I'm not saying that is not noble in itself, because I mean, Elijah is very much championing the things of God. Um, but we also have to remember Israel at the time was a theocracy. God made it to be a theocracy. So it was supposed to be governed according to the laws of God. Many of us live in countries or in places that are not theocracies. Okay, so we can pray and we can vote our conscience, but we have to also remember we live with people who believe very differently from us. Okay. Um, so here is Obadiah, who's a perfect example. He has every right to insist that no, this is our nation. This nation of Israel was built to, God made it, God established it, first of all, to be a theocracy. And King Ahab, what you and your wife Jezebel are doing is not in alignment with that. So I'm not going to obey anything you say. But it's interesting that Obadiah knows how to be an obedient servant to the king without violating God's law. So when the king sends him to go out and look for food, that's what he does. He obeys the king and he's a loyal servant to the king. Sometimes your testimony with people who are not believers is in your faithful service to them, is just being a good employee towards them, being just doing your job and doing it well and respecting them and honoring them. Okay, that is your testimony. That is the way you're an image bearer. Okay. um, but also notice, though, the other thing Obadiah does is that he does not do anything that is in offense towards God. What he does is he hides God's prophets, and he goes, and about 100 of them, and he goes and he feeds them food. Okay, because the king was out there looking for them to be killed. And so Obadiah, while he's here obeying the king, he's also obeying God and making sure that he's walking in the fear of the Lord. So let's be those people who can discern and know how to walk in that tension where the people around us who are not, who are opposed to the things of God, we can still respect them and we can still serve them well, but without violating and going against God's law and God's command. We know how to walk in that tension, all right, where we are not their enemies, but then we also are walking in the fear of the Lord. I don't know if I'm making, I don't know if I'm making that very clear. You can let me know in, in the comments if I'm not. But let's learn that difference, because we need that in this day and time as Christians continue to become a minority around the world. We need to learn how to walk in amongst people who don't believe the same way we do. Okay, where we don't have the political capital, if you will, or even financial, whatever, where we're the minority in numbers. Let's learn how to be people who we can be people of integrity, but yet not people who are violating God's commands. So I hope this was an encouragement. I really wanted to highlight the first part of what I was saying, which is about our expectations and how sometimes we can come with expectations that clash with the reality of what God is doing and what God is about and who He's revealing Himself to be. So even in our prayers, let's humble ourselves and say, Lord, I don't even know what's going on. This is so confusing. I'm so exhausted. It feels like one step forward, one step backwards. I thought we were going this way. I thought you were doing things this way, but it looks like no. I thought things, the stronghold was broken, but it looks like no, we're still, Jezebel is still over there doing things. Help me, Lord, to not only see you, to get not only see a revelation of you, but to hear what you're saying, and help me to obey, and help me to get a revelation of you. So anyway, I just hope that encourages you, and yeah, God bless you. Bye.